Because, if you go for the big promotion because that's success, when you get there, you suddenly realize that your hours are no longer relative to the hours you're supposed to work. You're now working more, longer hours. You're seeing less of your family, doing all these bits and pieces you weren't expecting. A lot of times, success is not what people think it is. So define what success is to you.
Be better tomorrow because of what you do today.
Welcome to the Fallible Man podcast, your home for all things man, husband, and father. My name is Brent, and I am the Fallible Man, and today I have a guest on who is a fellow podcaster, Paul Harvey of the Life, Passion, and Business podcast. Paul, thank you for joining us for the show today. It's a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Now, Paul, you are a podcaster, but this is not all where you started, right? I was looking through your bio, and this is kind of where you feel like you found a calling after doing other things for years, right?
I've been in marketing for 30 years. That's what I kind of was doing. I was in development down in London when I lived there, and I had grown tired of the corporate world. And so my wife and I, we were late parents because we were both just turning 40 when my son was born. And we wanted something different from the London life because we lived in a lovely road. It was a perfect place to live in London, but I knew 5 people down that street and had only been into one of their houses because it was just commuter belt. No one stayed there, and the weekends everyone did their own thing, sort of thing. And so we thought we need to be somewhere else. And so we ended up moving to Scotland. A long journey on that one, how we got here, but we ended up moving to Scotland. And so I'm a Londoner in Scotland, and I'm very far north. I'm 23 miles east of Inverness. I couldn't have gone much further north, actually. There is a bit further north, but not a lot. So I am like 600 miles from London. And so when I came here, I started in the marketing world again. I stayed in marketing, but it was for myself and supporting smaller businesses. So I enjoyed that. I had a lovely time. I really enjoyed working with over 200 different businesses, bakers, all sorts of real people doing real kind of jobs. It was very different from the corporate world where I was in. So it was a really, really interesting time when I first moved here. And for 10 years, I had a great time. Really, really enjoyed it. And it was after the financial crash that I started to struggle with marketing because I could see the consumption side of it was just starting to really pull on me. I could really see how we were just burning the planet for the sake of what? It's all about making money and just making more and doing more and doing more. And it's like, well, when is enough enough? So at that point, I started to reevaluate kind of what I wanted out of it and who I wanted to work for. So I did a major kind of shift of clients at that point. And I moved away from anyone who was kind of doing fast moving stuff or consumer stuff. And I moved into more people that were doing things that I could perceive had a human value. So I work with people I worked with a death coach for many, many years. And I say, that's a strange thing. What does a death coach do? Well, a death coach helps people plan for their death because, we're all going to go at some stage.
Right.
And people don't plan for it. And it's it was a fascinating journey discovering about that idea of end of life planning. And I can talk about that if you want to. It's really interesting.
It's not the one that most
so I
people
ended up doing
want.
things like that, with different people like that. And so that's where my life went to. And then in 2017, towards the end of 2017, my father died. And he was 89 years old, and he did not want to be 90. He died 2 weeks before his 90th birthday. My father lived in Essex, and that but I appreciate you're US, so you won't. So the sense of that is that's like 500 plus miles away. Mm-hmm. And I had moved to Scotland. I lived in Scotland, of course. And when we were in London, my parents moved out of London. They moved away from me first, so I didn't feel any qualms about moving away from them because he'd moved away from me, years before. So, but when he died, it was a bit of he had a tough old 20 years after my mum died. He didn't really connect with his own life. What I realized, when I was looking back at it, I realized that he lived vicariously through my mum for many, many years. And then after that, he kind of existed for 20 years. And I thought, God, Lord, he really is not kind of living. He didn't live his life. Why? What was that about? And when I started to look at his journey and think about some of the things that he'd responded to, I realized a lot of those things were in me. I realized that I had a lot of similar traits. And then I was just thinking about my life and what I was doing. I've got a nice house here, and I had all the trappings. I've got family. My son, I've got one son, my wife, and we had friends and bits and pieces. But I suddenly realized that I was just as cynical as my father had become, and I was on the journey, on that road. Mm. And I had a cold, hard realization one day that I didn't care whether I lived or died. I was like, I'm here for my son, but once he's gone, what does it matter? And that was really, really hard when I realized that I actually didn't care either way. And so that's when I thought, I've got to change this. I've got to do something about it. So this is when I started reaching out to people. Well, look, other people must know how to do this life thing. It can't be that difficult. Other people must know the journey, what we're doing here. So I started reaching out and having questions and asking conversations with people. So I was asking people, what are you passionate about? How do you measure the success? What determines success? Because it can't be money. I mean, all right, I know money's good, but once you get to a certain point, you only drive one car at a time, can't you? You only live in one house at a time. How much money do you need? All right, if you're sending rockets to Mars, you might need a bit more. But how much do you need? So we had those. I started asking those questions of people, and then it came the idea of contribution and meaning. And so that podcast went live in January 2018. It's like the podcast, it's the podcast problem, isn't it? You come up with the idea, you start doing the podcast, creating it, and then you won't release it. So I had all these, I was holding these things back because I was too scared to put them out in the world. And then in 2018, I launched it in January 2018. And so we're up to over 200 episodes now.
Wow. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
As a young podcaster, I think I'm at like 53 or no, it's more than that, but not much more than that. So that's a lot of episodes to go through.
Yeah, it is. It is a lot of episodes to go through, and you learn a lot in the journey. You learn a lot. But what I have discovered over those 200 episodes is that there's no right way to do life. There's no bloody meaning to it other than the meaning you choose to give it. Absolutely, because you talk to different people from all over the world, and one person will give you their Christian perspective, and one person will give you their Jewish perspective, and one person will give you their Muslim perspective, and so on, and every other thing in between. There ain't any one journey or story that is any different than anybody else. It's just the story that they believe and they sit to and they work with, and it works for them. And if it works for them, who am I to say it doesn't work?
Well, we all need something external almost to find meaning, it seems, in our lives. We need some kind of hope or belief to grasp onto and cling to that creates meaning for us, right?
I think we have to decide for ourselves what that might be. And it doesn't necessarily have to be external. It can be just as easily be, I accept there's no meaning and I accept each moment as it comes. It could be just like that. And I have met a couple of people that are very much like that. Talwanda Sidhu, I think his name is. He's a guy in Canada. And he discovered, he was taught meditation by his mum when he was a young man, about like 8 or 9. And he kind of says the past is the past and the future hasn't happened yet. And today is all that matters.
I actually just had a conversation. What day is it? I think Saturday. I was talking to a young podcaster out of Australia who does life coaching on how to let things go. And other than struggling with the fact that his age really showed through, he's a very young gentleman getting started in his life. And it's like, you have a lot of, I'm college age ideals but listening to him, that was his approach, was like, there's just not a right answer. There's no specific meaning. I just kind of experience everything as it happens. And that is what life is. It's like,
look, I think one of the advantages that a lot of younger people have, I mean, I'm 58, right? So when I started personal development, which probably was 30 years ago, it was books, it was tapes, and it was events. And there weren't that many, I certainly weren't many books around, and there weren't that many tapes around, and you had to go to specialist bookshops to find them. You know, youngsters now, people now can actually go and look on YouTube, and they can find, or a TED Talk or anything. You can find this information anywhere now. And so I think there's a lot more opportunity for people to discover personal growth and to discover those things for themselves.
Oh yeah, it's a golden time to, work on yourself. It really is. So we have more opportunities now between podcasting and social media and YouTube and, I mean, all the many platforms. I can't count how many TED Talks I probably have sat through, just rewatching them on YouTube and stuff like that. It is an ideal time if you want to grow, but there's also an ideal moment to get distracted from growing, because there's just so much stuff out there that's just entertainment that it's really easy to lose the personal growth stuff too. How many hours do people watch like cat videos and junk like that on YouTube, right? It's
yeah, well, they are. These things are incredibly addictive, aren't they? I mean, they're designed to be. I mean, they know what they're doing when they design these systems to hook us in.
I lost 3 years of my life to a video game. I actually tallied up time played on one particular game over the course of about 8 years. I literally have lost 3 years of my life to one video game in particular. And I had no idea at the time that I was investing that kind of time in it, until it has a feature in it where you can get a recount of how many hours you've played a certain character. So I added all of mine up and went, oh, that's 3 years of my life. Wow, that's...
But it's interesting. My son's a gamer. I know, and we kept him off games for years. He went through Steiner education, so he went through an education system which basically encourages you to restrict their media usage. And we restricted his media usage up to the age of 11. He watched no television, which he on some level says he regrets, but at the same time he also recognizes the value of it, because he has a far greater imagination than a lot of people have because of that time when he had to use his imagination. But he is making up for it big time now, because he's gone into game development.
Oh, okay. Now he gets paid to be a gamer.
Well, he's not quite there yet. He's still studying it, but that's the point. I mean, he is, absolutely putting the hours in gaming nowadays, because that's just what he does. That's what it is, and he's met all his friends across the world because of it. And for him, if he does put in 80, 90 hours into a game, it just proves the game is a good one.
Right? Yeah. No, I got a friend who's a streamer who gets paid to play video games.
Oh, wow. Nice job.
Yeah, I was like, wow, you figured out a trick there, didn't you? But hey, I ask all my guests. This is my question. I got to ask the important one here, okay? What is your favorite ice cream?
That kind of, again, that's kind of evolved over time, actually. I used to like rum and raisin quite a lot for years, and I used to quite like that because it's an unusual flavor, I guess. I guess some of the chocolate cookie ones are quite nice. I'm just a bit of a tart with this one. I go with whatever I like in the moment.
I can appreciate that, because there are days that this sounds good, and there are days that it's like, I really want this. I'll go through swings. I have my regular ice creams, but every now and then I'll see like a nice fruit-based ice cream, like strawberry or something, or huckleberry walking through the store. And I'm like, you know what? That just sounds really, really good. I could do that. So
we've gone to ice cream about personal development. Is that a distraction tactic?
No. It's I actually started asking my guests that probably the beginning of season 2 for my podcast.
Fair enough.
Just because we all have so much in common as humans, right? But we all have our individual taste, and it also just tends to lighten the mood a little bit. People aren't expecting me to ask about ice cream. I'm sure it's not a question you get asked a lot of podcasts.
No, not often. Not often.
But it's fun to see people react to it too. And it doesn't always even make the final cut. In fact, it frequently doesn't. But it lets people take a breath and go, oh, look, yeah, real people here. It's a, we're recording, but it's a real thing. And it's just something fun because people are so individual. I had someone tell me, a gentleman in Sydney who was burnt fig and almond. And it's some kind of high end. There's a chef in Sydney that is one of her things.
There was an ice cream that was done in London some years ago. I think it was fish and chip ice cream or something.
See?
One of those kind of like, things you don't need to try. Was it Blumenthal? Was it Heston Blumenthal? He did his snail porridge, another thing you don't need to try as well.
Oh my goodness, no. That's just, wow.
There we are.
So you started on this podcasting adventure and you've got 200 episodes down and it's life, passion, and business. And that's what you're talking about. That's what you're focusing on. It's just... It
is. And I'm very much about the midlife journey. I mean, as a midlife man, I recognize what I bumped into with my father dying. It wasn't just him dying. It's the trigger point to midlife, I think. We all have a midlife crisis, or men do, or women do. Now, women have it physically because their body changes. And so they get that warning that it's happening and they're going to have their body's changing. So that starts to happen for them. So they know they're entering midlife, but we don't. Men don't. I mean, we do have physical changes in our body. The pubes go grey. So, I mean, that's a physical change. It's one of those things you don't think that, they do. But, other than those, we don't have the same physical changes that women do. And one thing I noticed that for most midlife change in men, it's triggered by an external situation. And mine was triggered by my father dying. I recognized that I was not happy in my life. And I think it happens to a lot of men who they've either been in a job for many, many years and they've got all the trappings of that job and they're suddenly sitting back and going, I've got another 30 years of this life like this. What am I going to do with it? How do I want to live it? And those things are really, really, really important to think about. When we're young, we plan our life to some extent. We've got this success model that gets given to us. Study hard, do this, do this, do this, do this. And it's a crock, the whole success model, because most people don't find happiness and joy out of it.
Right.
But it does get the ball rolling. And at some point you have to define your own success model. That's why success is a massive question in the podcast. Because it is a massive question. How do you define success? What is going to be a good day for you? And I think when we get to that midlife point, we've got to actually reevaluate what we want to achieve between now and the end. Because the end will come. Mm-hmm. You ain't getting out of this world alive. So, that's what my focus these days is. This idea is supporting ideally men through the midlife crisis and helping them take charge of it. See, I think there's this thing about we've got to ask ourselves the important questions. We've got to ask them not just once a year, every week, every month. What's the important question? What do I want? What am I passionate about this week? What was I passionate about? Where was I my joy this week? What was I happy about this week? What was good? Can I, do I write it down? I mean, I journal every single day now because I recognize how valuable journaling is to me. And I ask myself questions in my journal constantly. So one of my questions, I was asking questions in my journal over the weekend. And one of the questions that came up is, are you looking for approval? And I thought, oh, God, of course I'm looking for approval. Everyone's looking for approval. So I mean, on my podcast, I ask people to like, share, and review the podcast. Why? Because I want to approve it. But when you get to that midlife age, where's my approval going to come from? And do I really? Am I chasing it? Social media makes us chase approval because it makes us look for likes and shares.
Yeah. I have 8 different social media accounts as the Fallible Man on like 8 different platforms, not counting multiple pages on some of them. And I despise social media to like, I always have. But looking at social media, it's like, wow, we're crushing people because everybody shows off their best moments. You don't see, right? I mean, so we do podcasting. You aren't seeing on this side of my camera, right? You're seeing me, but you don't see this side of the camera. And to have the lights look a certain way and the room look a certain way and the coloration, you're not seeing that there are arms around me with lights and above me and behind me, and right, to get a certain look, that polished, clean, right? And that's how every social media
Well, it looks a lot better than mine does, though, because this bloody green screen's playing up today. I've got this funny grey area over here for some reason today. So yes, I know.
Right, but I mean that's all social media is people at their most polished, perfect moments. We see those guys with the perfect bodies, and we're like, and they starve themselves for. I was watching. It was a Q&A for that show, The Witcher, and they were talking about the main characters, seeing Henry Cavill, and great actor. I enjoy his work a lot of times, but they were asking about this one scene where he takes a bath in the show, right? And he has to be shirtless. He went like 3 days without eating and dehydrated himself for a day and a half.
Yeah, you have
just
to.
look
It's called
more,
shredding. You have
right?
to do shredding to do that. Yeah, so that the muscles stick out. Yeah, that's right. That's what you have to do.
It's like I see those interviews. I watched another actor talk about playing Tarzan and the diet he was on for months and months and the workout regimens. And he's like, as soon as they like ended production on the movie, I went out and ate like 3 pizzas because all I'd eaten was nothing but clean protein and vegetables to look that shredded. You know, he wasn't huge. He was just completely shredded, right? That very lean, thin, natural, but just shredded out. And he's like, I had breakdowns during shooting where I just broke down and cried. It's like people don't understand those are the polished moments, and those aren't real. That's not
indeed
reality at all. It was interesting. You're talking about the change brought on by your father's passing. I just lost my father back in July. And he lived here with my family, with my mom. And I took 2 weeks off. I have a full-time job, but I took 2 weeks off to attend to him in his final days because he's a big guy. My mom just couldn't handle him by herself anymore. My dad's 6'5", 300 plus pounds, 400 pounds. And so I had taken a week off to help in the final week and then some time afterwards. And when I went back to work, all I had been doing for weeks is being with my family and working on the podcast. That's no 9 to 5, nothing else like that, right? I went back to my 9 to 5 job and was like, this feels so hollow and empty because I'm just sitting at a computer desk working. There's no, I'm a hiring manager, so they would replace me tomorrow. I know, because I'm the guy who does it, right? And so walking back into that, it's like, this is my life, and this just feels so empty. It's part of the reason I do the podcast. So it's very interesting to me that is a big motivator for you.
Well, it's a motivator because it's like, I mean, this is my day job, you know. I mean, and this is what I do. I do this all the time. So, and that's because I did it's funny. I did the podcast. I did an interview a few months back. When COVID hit last year, I released the last of my marketing clients. I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say, yes, we should keep spending your money because it's going to work, even though we're in a global pandemic. I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say yes. So we kind of like, look, let's draw a line at this and see what happens. And I've never gone back because it's like, I just don't want to go back to that. So that we're resourced enough to keep the podcast rolling and do this, and that's what we're looking for, and that's what we're doing. We're turning this into a business, and right. And I did virtual events last year, and that's my future. I think I'm a better presenter than I am a marketer. Well, it's certainly where my passion lies. Anyway, and this is for me, and I think that's the journey for me about my life, passion, and business, and my midlife work. You see, my midlife change was starting the podcast. And that's where I got my oomph from. That's not going to be everyone's journey. I think everyone needs to do the work and find out what their journey is going to be. And that's the point. I think by the time we get to midlife, people have stopped doing the journey. They're literally just coasting. They're coasting that life. And you've got to put the effort in. You've got to actually do the work all the time.
But by that time, we've settled, right? We bought into what they tell us in school. Do your schooling, get an education, go get a job, buy a home, get married, have a couple kids. That's it. Yay, you achieved, right? That is the sales pitch. And we bought into it at that point.
That's the American dream that gets sold around the world, really.
And I'd love to say it's just the American dream, but I mean, it's been sold and packaged and shipped everywhere. But we bought into it at that point. And I think there's a point where your heart just breaks a little bit at that crisis point, and you're like, really? This is it?
You've had it. You've got it now, haven't you? Because you're sitting at that crux point because you've gone back into your role, and you're kind of going, what's the point?
Yeah, it's like
all right, I'm going to reverse the conversation.
No.
Do you have a plan now? What's your plan for getting out of that one?
I don't actually have a plan. Okay. I wish I could say I was that organized. I started this journey with the podcast, and it grew from possibly writing a book to social media, so I would have an audience, to a podcast, to YouTube. And I wish I could say I actually had a plan. I suck at marketing. That is my biggest weakness in business, is I am horrible at marketing. I don't know my head from my tail, man. And so getting it out in front of people, it's not like I'm making any money doing this at this point. It cost a lot of money for all the money I put into this, but I don't have a set plan, and I kind of wish I did. But at the same time, I also kind of enjoy the fact that I don't, because at the moment I just feel fulfilled.
I started this podcast without a financial plan on it either. There's no, a lot of people start a podcast with a monetization plan from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. So, we have, that's why we do virtual events, and I do coaching, and I do focus coaching and midlife coaching. So that's why I do those that's how I fund it. Yeah.
I was at a seminar. I spent last weekend in a YouTube conference all weekend. And one of the guys was talking about, I don't really know. I want to start a YouTube channel, but I don't really. I said, look, if you wouldn't do it without ever getting paid, don't start that channel. If you walk into this thinking, I'm going to use this to make me a fortune, and that's why you're picking that subject, you're going to burn out so quick.
Putting my marketing hat back on, which I have taken off, but I will put it back on briefly. The way to do this is to find the problem that you're looking to solve, find the audience who have that problem, and then create the product around them and the problem, and with the solution that you have for them.
I would agree. I've heard that advice for business, but the only additive I think for me I had to throw in was I have to be passionate about it and believe it, or I can't sell stuff to people or even fix problems I don't care about. I just can't. It's not in my nature.
Yeah, I understand. Absolutely.
I've heard lots of very wealthy businessmen throw out that advice with find a problem that needs solving and solve it, package it and sell it, right? It's like, that's great, but I can half-ass anything that I don't believe in, but that's what I feel like I would do if I didn't love and wasn't passionate about it. Kind of feel like that's how I've gotten through life a long ways to where I'm at now. So yeah. I think that there's a double edge on that one. It's like, do you have to be passionate to make money, or can you be passionate outside of it? And there's a lot of people that have that viewpoint that you make your money and you put your passion somewhere else. And there's that Japanese philosophy that's called Ikigai. Have you heard of that one? Mm-mm.
Okay, so Ikigai it's a Venn diagram with 4 circles.
Okay.
And in each circle is what you're passionate about, what the world wants, what you're good at, and what you get paid for. And where all those circles converge is where you can make a good living and be happy.
Okay, I've seen a diagram with that. I just didn't know what it was called.
Yeah.
Now, for years, I've gone with I do the job I don't particularly care about that makes the money while I try and do other things.
Okay.
So.
Well, that works. It's your life. You do it how you choose. That's the point.
Well, I'm trying to change that now. I'm trying to get to what I love and what I'm passionate about and find a way that it makes money.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
Yeah,
I'd love for this hobby to pay for itself because I'd like it to be more than a hobby, but we'll get there, right? Time
will come. It will happen.
So, Paul, we're going to roll to our sponsor real quick. And then, guys, we're going to get into, I have some very specific questions I would actually like to ask you about going into the second half of the show. So we'll be right back.
Today's episode brought to you by thefallibleman.com. That's right, it's us. Head over to www.thefallibleman.com and check out our blog, updated twice a week with new content and links to all of our social media offerings. Tag or search us at The Fallible Man or at Fallible Man on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social medias for daily content. While you're there, check out our attitude swag, shirts, cups, stickers, and more. Again, that's www.thefallibleman.com.
And we're back, guys, with Paul Harvey of the Life, Passion, and Business podcast, and he is dropping some great wisdom bombs. I got to admit, this show is not going anywhere close to where my notes are, and I'm totally okay with that. I think I'm
now curious what your notes had on them.
you're delivering way better than I could have planned it, so that works. But I really wanted to ask, I saw it in your bio, because I'm a huge believer in the idea that asking the right questions can change everything. Mm-hmm. I mean, just phenomenally change everything for you. And I saw that in your bio, you talked about you've brought down to 5 questions that just redefine everything for somebody. And I would really love to get into that if you would share.
Well, those are the questions that I ask every guest on the podcast. And it's very simple. It's like, and we've touched on them already. It's like, what are you passionate about is the first one. It's like, what is the reason for being here? What are you passionate about? What do you do? Now, what is interesting about that passion question is that sometimes you can track it right the way back from childhood. A lot of my guests did something as a child or experienced something as a child. And what happens is they find a career in later life and that passion is coming out. That childhood discovery is coming out. So that is quite clear in terms of, it's very obvious when that kind of thing meets. And then once you've established a passion, you have got to understand what success means to you. Because, we've already touched on that. This idea of the success model is something that we were sold. But I have met so many people on the podcast and externally the podcast that get the goal that they were told would be good. They buy the fast car, they get the big house, they get all these things, and they just find they're bloody miserable. Because, if you go for the big promotion because that's success, when you get there, you suddenly realize that your hours are no longer relative to the hours you're supposed to work. You're now working longer hours. You're seeing less of your family, doing all these bits and pieces you weren't expecting. A lot of times, success is not what people think it is. So define what success is to you. Success to me, a successful day to me is a day that's a productive day. It's not going to be a hard working day, but it'll be a productive day. I will have achieved 3 or 4 things that I wanted to achieve in the daytime. And for me, that's success. I spent years making bloody long to-do lists and beating the crap out of myself at the end of the day for not completing half of it and wondering why I felt so sort miserable because I set myself up to fail even before I started.
Can I pause you right there? Guys, hear what he just said. Busy does not equate to productive. We value busyness in the society, especially in various cultures around the world, right? We value busyness instead of productivity.
It's macho to be busy. You
Right.
can say to your mates, I work really hard today. You can really grunt it out. That makes us feel like good men because we grunted it out.
So sorry, I had to just point that out. I have read the 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, and it's the whole premise of the book, right? I don't know if you've read that one or not.
I have, and he lied because he didn't actually do 4 hours. But the point is, it sold the book title.
Oh yeah,
But the point is, what Tim Ferriss is about is do the one thing. It's the same thing as that other book. It's the one thing. That's another bloody brilliant book. What is the one thing that will take you forward now? And you do the one thing, the one thing, the one thing. You keep doing the one thing.
Mm-hmm.
The most important thing that takes you forward. But back to this, the success thing is define what success means to you. That is really critical. And all of my podcast guests, I guess, is that because I choose them particularly? I guess it's difficult because I'm looking for a particular kind of guest. So I guess they all say the same thing, but they don't really. I'm looking for people that have found the answers to something and they're in that kind of happy life. I'm not looking for people that are grinding. So I guess if I was to talk to someone who was grinding, they would tell me that's their measure of success. The fact that they might be dead in 5 years from a heart condition or something is not really something But that's the point. Define it for yourself. The third question is contribution. So as humans, we can be totally selfish, but the greatest value that I have found from all of my guests, they all say the greatest value is when they realize that they are contributing to other people, when they're giving something to other people. And for me, my contribution is the podcast, is sharing this message. That's from my perspective. But it is the idea when we can do something for others, support others, help others, make a contribution, you make them feel good and you make yourself feel good too. And that's the most amazing part about it. Because, if you've helped someone, if you change someone's life, how good is that going to make you feel? There's nothing better than that, really. Nothing better at all. But I've also added the new layer to that contribution question over the last few months. And I ask people now, how do you contribute to yourself? Because one thing that did occur to me, it's all well contributing to other people. If you contribute to others at the expense of yourself, that's not serving you either. The old adage in marketing and business terms is put your own oxygen mask on first. The old take the aeroplane model.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you don't put your oxygen mask on, you're going to pass out. But it's the same in terms of contribution to yourself on a daily basis. So eating right, getting enough sleep, exercising, doing some kind of meditative practice, asking yourself the right questions. For me, my day starts with writing. There's always yoga or some kind of physical exercise. I run a lot these days. And it's all about keeping my body, because it's an older body, and I recognize if I don't keep it... Well, you see, that's another thing. My father and I didn't have the best relationships, but he's taught me so much. His knees were in a terrible mess by the time he was in his 80s. And it's like, I thought, if I'm going to get knees like that, I better do something about these knees I've got here, because mine were clicking by the time I was 50.
Yeah.
They don't click anymore, I have to say, because, I've put the work in over the last few years to make sure that I've got reasonable knees, and now I'm running. So, yeah, but that's the point. Contribute to yourself as well as others.
It's very valid these days. I've heard several people talk about, people are coming around to at least that thought process finally. It's like, wait, if I don't take care of me, how can I take care of anybody else?
Well, you're in the best place for it, aren't you? Because my medical care is paid for. You've got to pay for your own medical care. And I've seen the bills you lot pay.
Oh my goodness. I just don't go to the doctor.
Sorry?
I just don't go to the doctor.
No, I know it's what happens in the States, and you just don't go to the doctor. And it was the same here in the 1940s and 50s.
Did you ever see the old Garfield cartoons? Like the newspaper?
No, I haven't seen them actually. No.
Okay, so Garfield is the big orange fat cat that likes lasagna.
Yeah, I know who he is. Yeah.
One of my best friends loved Garfield, so she had these all over her room. And there's this clip that always stuck in my head, and it was Odie, the dog, sitting next to Garfield on a tree branch, right? And the commentary was, it's amazing what you can do if you don't know you can't. And so I kind of adopted that in my brain. So there's nothing wrong with me if I don't go to the doctor and they tell me, and I don't know there's something wrong with me, right? Isn't that how it works?
No, I don't think so. But there we go. If that works for you, hey, what am I to say?
I'm sure it's not actually healthy, but it's kind of the way my brain works. If I don't know it's wrong, then it's not really wrong.
Indeed. But I mean, on that story, I saw an interview with one of the politicians years ago, who was instrumental in starting the National Health Service in the UK.
Mm-hmm.
And he went to see an old lady. This is in the 1960s. And the health service has been going a few years. I think it started in 1958, the health service, something like that. And he went to see her. He was on the doorstep doing, canvassing as they do. And she, oh, do come in. I'd love to talk to you. So he was quite famous. So he went and had a chat with her, and she said, I need to thank you for the health service. And he went on this conversation, and he discovered that she was still paying for her children's illnesses. She was paying the doctor like 5 shillings a week or something, whatever it was, for the children's illnesses that they'd had like 30 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
And like now her kids didn't have to do that, because the health service made that change. So yeah, it is one of the things that does define us in the UK, I think.
I sympathize. My oldest daughter is 9. I'm still paying for her being born.
Right. Okay.
She was in the hospital for a week because she was a preemie, and so we were in the NICU for a week. And she's perfectly healthy now, but we were in the NICU for 1 week, and she's 9 and a half actually, and we're still paying that bill.
Yeah, I'm sure you are. And the point is, you're one of the most, the most affluent nations on the planet, and yet you can't solve that problem. But there we go. We're not going there, I guess.
I love my country. I won't pretend we're perfect.
Anyway, the next question I always ask my guests, because a lot of it is to do with business stuff. So the question I always ask them is, what is the one question you want people to ask themselves? And the reason I ask them that, or ask of you, and it's about that launch pad question. And I think we all ought to have that. It's like what's your subject? What is it that you like to talk about? Because when you feed someone with a question that they can ask you something back, it just allows you that opportunity to have the conversation that you want to have with people. So it's very much relative to people on the podcast there. But I think there is a value in having a question or having something that you want people to ask of themselves. It's a good conversation piece. And then the final question that we always ask our guests is, what's the meaning of life? And it's the one that has had all sorts of answers, from nothing to love to God to everything, when the kitchen sink, because there is so many answers to that question, because we're all human and we all have to define it for ourselves. But that's the point. We have to define it for ourselves.
I was going to say, that goes back to the beginning of the conversation.
Well, it does. And I think part of the issue is that certainly 40 years ago in this country,
mm-hmm.
Christianity was much stronger than it is. Most people went to church, or at least went to church once a month or at some point. They did some kind of formal religion. And the priest told them what the meaning of life was. And that was it. They didn't need to think about it because the priest had told them. But as that formal religion has passed from I won't say the majority, but a lot of people, Christianity is not as powerful as it once was. It doesn't have anywhere near the followers. Maybe your country is different, but certainly in the UK, it's not the same.
No, it's shrinking everywhere, I think.
Yeah. And I think that shrinking has produced a vacuum which people have to fill. And sadly, they're filling it with Netflix and retail therapy.
Yeah. Almighty Amazon.
Yeah, that's what they're filling it with. But, because they're told that if you buy this, you'll feel better.
Right back to social media influencing, right?
We are.
They're happy.
Yeah.
They're happy. Look, they have this. That makes them happy. We window into people's lives, just feeding that retail therapy, man. We look at everybody else and want.
But that is the critical question, isn't it? Like, what is humanity for? What is our purpose? Do we have a purpose? Some people, a lot of people said that we are spiritual beings living a physical reality, living a physical existence. A lot of people have said that to me. We're a soul, a spiritual being living a physical existence. This could just easily be a virtual reality system that we paid our money and we stepped into.
Mm-hmm.
It could just as easily, it's perfect. I appreciate it's perfect. But, when they stick atoms in the atom smasher, the bits that come out are the same in everyone. It's the same stuff. And we are all 99.99% no thing. Yep. So, it's like there's just gaps in between us. So, it could just be a very, very clever virtual reality machine.
I work in the IT industry for a living. My normal 9 to 5 job. I work in the IT industry. And we all joke about that. It's like, oh, we're just plugged in the Matrix. The 90s movie, The Matrix.
Yes.
It's like, yep, we're just all plugged in the Matrix. We're just.
Yes. Well, when you look at, it is a very seductive idea, because when you look at kind of coincidence and stuff and things that happen. I did an event last year. One of my events I did was called Spirituality. And it was the idea of this duality about living in the real world and in the spirit world, this idea about how we deal with spirituality and in life. And it came about because a lot of my guests have spiritual experiences that change them, but they don't call it that. They call it luck. They call it all bits and pieces. But you can see for a while it's hit them like a poleaxe and they've gone bomb. And it's been a spiritual awakening for them because they've changed how they've worked. And some of them have, I've acknowledged that's what it is, and some of them don't. So I did this event around this, and then the conversations I had with people, some of the stories that came out from this people, I was talking to a Jesuit priest, to rabbis, all sorts of people on this event. But some of the things that happened, like someone guided that, someone gave that a push, because it's like, if you'd said that would have fallen into place like that, it wouldn't. How did that fall into place like that? The Jesuit priest, he will say it's God. He was a priest in Pinochet's now where is Pinochet? Where was that regime? Chile. He was in Chile during the Pinochet regime, which was a fascist regime. Taking people off the streets, people disappearing, people dying all over the place. And it was a really bad place to be. And he was there serving his community. And there were many times that he was almost kidnapped, almost killed. And there was always something which saved him and stopped him from getting got at. And he would just say it was the grace of God. And you can't argue with the guy, can you really? Because he survived.
It'd be about like arguing with Mother Teresa, right?
Yeah.
Lived and served in a population of highly contagious, individuals who are basically damned once they get the disease as far as their lives, and lived among them for how many years serving those people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
now that
what was her answer?
It could just be the operator of the machine making sure you're fine. Anyway, there we go.
So these are the 5 questions, guys, and you can ask yourself these questions, okay? You don't have to wait to be a guest on someone's show. You don't have to have someone intervene in your life. You can ask yourself these 5 questions and really start to hone in on who you want to be and where you want to go. These are phenomenal questions. Thank you for sharing those. It's
powerful stuff. It is powerful stuff if you start using it. It really is. Guys, and I say I run my life on it these days. It is my life. I journal. It's here by my side. It's never far away from me. I do all sorts of stuff, basically, but it very much is along the lines of the 5 questions. What will be success for me today is one of the questions I often ask myself.
I always like to leave my audience with something actionable. Okay, guys, so take notes, rewind the show if you need to, take notes, write down these 5 questions. Try it for a week. I'm not asking you to commit to anything long. I'm not asking you to radically change your life today. I'm asking you to write down these 5 questions and start your morning every day for the next week. Just see where it takes you. See if it changes who you are. See if it affects you. Everybody's going to react differently.
I would edit that a little bit for you, because
Okay.
I think it'd be easy to do the first 3. I think the last 2 are a little bit difficult. But if you were to look at your day and say, okay, what am I passionate about today? What would I define as success today? And how could I contribute today? Just taking those 3 things for a week, you'd be surprised what comes out of it. Now, contribution could be as simply as having a nice conversation with someone at a checkout, changing someone's day, just asking someone something nice about, so how's your day been today? Just do it. That is a contribution, changing someone's day.
It is. I agree entirely. We often make that way too complicated. Everybody thinks when you ask something like that, what earth-shattering scientific what crimes against humanity did you? No. How did you treat your waitress today?
Buy the homeless guy a coffee.
Right?
Yeah, it's like.
Were you nice to your barista? Did you treat your coworker with a little courtesy and respect when maybe they didn't deserve it? And contribution can be. We try and scale this up for some silly reason, but man, it's just about day-to-day life and how you interact with other people and the impressions you leave on them. I used to ask my daughters before they went to bed every night. I asked them 3 questions. What are 3 things you're grateful for? What is one thing you did for somebody else today? And what is one thing that somebody did for you today? And that's how we ended the night. Because I wanted them to foster that mindset and start thinking about those things that have value.
They are great questions to do for children. The gratitude thing is wonderful stuff to do because it allows them to actually see value in the world.
Guys, I'm not sure we can actually end stronger than that. So I'm going to say, be better tomorrow because of what you do today. And we'll see you next time.
This has been the Fallible Man Podcast, your home for everything man, husband, and father. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a show. Head over to www.thefallibleman.com for more content and get your own Fallible Man gear.